The purpose of the game is to score one more goal than the opposition. That is how you win the game. Essentially, you want to get the ball to the player who's the closest to the goal with the least number of defenders between the ball and the goal. Playing the ball forwards is the best way to do that. Playing the ball sideways is not bad or good. It is the alternative if you cannot play the ball forwards. Being direct is not a bad thing. It is trying to accomplish the purpose of the game. So that's where I think now a change is happening, where hopefully people are more starting to think about the game in a rational way, where winning is a starting point and not liking a playing style is a starting point. What's happening is these coaches are actually negatively influencing the development of players because you're teaching them something that will not happen and you don't want them to happen on the Saturday. Football is actually taught backwards to youth players. You should be look forward as the best option. Does not mean you have to play the ball, but look forward. And if forward is not on, then this is the next option. Then you work your way backwards. So we want to actually have less of the ball than the opposition.
Hello coaches, welcome back to another Modern Soccer Coach episode. This week we are joined by Ilya Orlov, Director of Football and Head Coach at University of Toronto and Alliance United in Canada. This one is different for sure. We pride ourselves at Modern Soccer Coach on having open discussions around the game, even if those opinions differ from the majority. I think football thinking outside the box and facilitating these conversations is more important than ever. That's exactly why I wanted to get Ilya on and have this discussion around his views and his ways of working around the game. Please feel free to leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think. As always, likes, shares would be appreciated. And before we jump in, a big shout out to Soccer Coach Weekly. If you're a busy grassroots coach, they're ready to go, practice plans, save time and keep players engaged. Modern Soccer Coach listeners get 50% off. Can you believe that? 50% off for a full year subscription. Just visit soccerweekly.net/SCW-USA and use the code Gary50. Don't worry folks, I will put the information on the interview below in the podcast notes as well. Please check out Soccer Coach Weekly. Plan fast, coach smart with Soccer Coach Weekly. Massive thanks to them for the support. Okay, here we go. Ilya, enjoy. Ilya, thanks so much for joining me today on the Modern Soccer Coach podcast. Really excited to chat.
Appreciate you having me on, Gary. Looking forward to the discussion.
Yeah, we just had a quick chat off air about, where do I start this? Okay, here's where I'll start it. You said something really interesting. I want to bring it back off air about you've been around the world, and we're going to talk about direct football, vertical football, but I think it's important to talk about the predictability of football and talk about this version of the game that may not actually be helping us. Everyone, you said, I've been to a lot of places, Gary, everywhere's playing 4-3-3. Talk to me about what that creates and what you see and what the challenges are with that.
Yeah, so like I mentioned to you off air, I've been everywhere in the world, in Europe, in South America, in Asia. Obviously, I'm based in Canada, but I've been to the US a lot. And the standard formation, again, some vary, but it is a form of the goalkeeper. So 1-4-3-3. And that obviously has changed over time. I mean, going back to a couple of decades, because then there's more 1-4-4-2. But let's say maybe with the Pep revolution, that's gone to a lot of the youth development has been linked to 1-4-3-3. And every formation has its advantages and disadvantages. But if players are developed in one style of play, their entire youth development, and they get to the senior level, whether that's at the professional level, semi-professional, university, any senior level, and then they're faced with a different challenge, meaning the opposition is no longer playing 1-4-3-3, but they're playing two strikers, and now the center backs are playing 1 against 1, and they can no longer pressure cover. And you've never been taught that because both teams have played 1-4-3-3 their whole youth development. What happens then? And that is where the application is now challenged, and now where players face a difficulty.
One of the things I was excited about this conversation is that, reading some of your work and even some of your posts, a lot of people are nervous about presenting themselves as, well, I'm a possession-based coach. I play a great style. we're not direct. The other guy's direct. The other coach is direct, but I'm not. You've said in post and you're like, that's where I see value in football. Two questions. One, is that accurate of like you're comfortable in that space? And then the other is like, why do you think others aren't in that there? Have we created a fear about effective football?
Yeah. So essentially, to understand football, you have to understand the theory of football. And as I mentioned off air, Raymond Verheijen's a big mentor of mine. And then I've been influenced by my other mentor, Ernst Tanner, who's a sporting director of Philadelphia Union. I mentioned that to you. And we just start off the theory of football, and let's just speak about attacking right now. So attacking, the purpose of the game is to score one more goal than the opposition. That is how you win the game. If you have the ball, you are by definition attacking. The goal is in a certain direction. So the ball has to get to the goal and into the goal for you to accomplish the intention of attacking, which is scoring the goal. So if that is the theory, the starting point of the theory. The next theoretical point is, and this no one can really argue this in the world. Again, Raymond explained this to me and Ernst explained this to me. So it's not my ideas. These are ideas I developed from them. But essentially, you want to get the ball to the player who's the closest to the goal with the least number of defenders between the ball and the goal. You ask any coach in the world and any player in the world, it's not a disagreeable fact that the closer the ball is to the goal, the more chance you have of one, shooting the ball, and second, of converting that shot into a goal. Okay, so that's kind of the theoretical point. And then the application part comes in, our application in terms of directness. In terms of when we have the ball and we're attacking, we want to get to the goal to accomplish what the team wants to accomplish. Playing the ball forwards is the best way to do that. Playing the ball sideways is not bad or good. It is the alternative if you cannot play the ball forwards. If you cannot play the ball sideways, keeping the ball, just the player keeping the ball, is the next alternative. Playing backwards is the next thing you could do, and then losing the ball is the worst. That is that's not disputable. So if we know that's the theory, and we have now a way of doing that in terms of playing forward and now thinking the application, how do we do that? Then being direct is not a bad thing. It is trying to accomplish the purpose of the game. The question should be the people in football that preach not to be direct or not to try to go forward when you have the ball and trying to play backwards. Why are they doing that? What is their intention of doing that? And possession is, or keeping the ball, like I said, it's not a negative. It is the alternative of not being able to play forward and trying to score. So that's where kind of the directness part lies. It's just the theory behind the sport of football.
All right, coaches, we'll take a quick break here, and this is a special offer for Grassroots coaches. We all know how hard it is to keep players engaged and run great sessions when you are tight on time. That's why we are proud to team up with Soccer Coach Weekly. Since 2006, they've helped over 50,000 coaches, parents and teachers around the world, and now they've redesigned everything with US volunteer coaches in mind. Each week, you'll get proven practice plans, fun small-sided games, and coaching advice that's easy to use right off your phone or your laptop. As a listener of Modern Soccer Coach podcast, you get access to a 50% offer. That's right, 50% off an annual subscription. Premium access, just go to soccercoachweekly.net/SCW-USA. Don't worry, I'll put the link in the podcast description in the notes below. And use the promo code Gary50 for 50% off. Again, Gary50 for 50% off. Plan fast, coach smart with Soccer Coach Weekly. Please check them out. Links are below, and a huge thanks to them for supporting the podcast. Back to Ilia. It's funny, like direct football still, again, coaches, I think there's a fear amongst coaches that you don't want to be perceived as direct. So verticality has taken over as a cooler word for that, I believe. Rui Faria in his interview used the word pragmatic, and I thought, oh, that's a cool word too. I'll take that one. But I wonder why. Why do you think now? Not to go on as well. Not to go on about coaches, but why do you think? So recently in the Club World Cup, we saw Salzburg with that kind of counter pressing direct football, and it is different on the continuum, lies different on the continuum to that slow build possession game. But why do you think that when you say counter pressing vertical direct football, I think of at the highest level, I think of the Red Bull model. And but why do you think that there's not as many teams today playing in that style?
Where I think this all started was again from the Pep revolution of Barcelona. They were winning Champions Leagues, they were winning La Liga, and they were doing it in a certain style of play. So people's brains associate success, which is winning, and whatever is going on. So people in the football world associated this style of play, so the application to the winning. And that became the trend of the world. But what people did not, let's say, rationally think about is the starting point were the players that Barcelona had. So Messi, Xavi, Iniesta. One, they were a lot of the players already developed in a way from an early age to play this way. The next thing is what people don't really want to talk about is they have access to the best players in Catalonia, in Spain, and in the world. So they complemented those really, really good players who can play in small areas. They complemented that with superstars who can also play in that way without massive budget. So that's where the association started, and people did not rationally think about it, but they liked the way it was done. And this likeness is what brought this to everywhere else. So association said, Barcelona does it like this, so it must be true. And then individual coaches thought, or individual clubs thought, okay, Barcelona does, so let's recreate that. But they did not have the players that Barcelona had, did not have the resources that Barcelona had. And that's where I think it started. So going back to your question, where does it come from? And it looked good. It looked really good. But if you actually analyze and do the data, Barcelona still scored most of the goals in transition. Not as fewer than other teams, but still majority of the goals were in transition, because we can get into that later, into the application. But essentially, that was the starting point. Now you see teams that are going away from that because, for example, we're both in North America. The top three teams in the Eastern Conference right now are Philadelphia Union, Nashville, and Cincinnati. Those are the top three. They all play with two strikers. And again, that's not proof that this is the way to do it. But now I think people are, let's say, rationally thinking about, maybe the 4-3-3 and small passes, short passes, and building up is not the only way. And there might be another way. So, and Red Bull obviously is very influential and big in that. So that's the explanation of where it started. And now you see also, for example, Barcelona has completely changed with Hansi Flick. Pep Guardiola has changed when he's gone to Manchester City. So, and he presses with two strikers now. So that's where I think now a change is happening, where hopefully people are more starting to think about the game in a rational way, where winning is a starting point and not liking a playing style is a starting point.
I wonder how much, again, going down the lazy river of thinking training styles, then, okay, so if I see a version of a game that I particularly like, again, coaches consume information different today. A lot of coaches consume it in 15, 20-second clips. So it's easy to pick up preferences. And then I also think training today, it's easier to manage it. The sports scientist will be happier if you do a rondo, small spaces, progressions. Do you think that has anything to do with it? It must be harder to manage a high pressing system, or like a counter pressing intensive actions constantly.
So this could be a long conversation, but I'll narrow it down. So essentially, the training when players are in possession games with no direction and no goal, the question a coach should ask themselves is, what are they conditioning the players to perform? If there's no direction, So going forward and going backwards and going sideways does not exist because it is all the same. But then, so let's say here, hypothetically, we have a training session on Thursday, youth training session, under 13 training session, and there's no direction. So it's 10 passes and a point. You're training the brain, pass, 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 pass. In 2 days, you have a match, and now you have to go forward, but you have not gone forward at training. So now, how can you expect the players to perform football actions that are related to the purpose of the game, which is winning, which is in attacking, scoring, but you're doing possession games? And then coaches will argue, oh yeah, but then it teaches them to pass. But if you do, let's say, hypothetically, a 6v6 game with direction, whether it's goals, small goals, a dribble line, whatever it is, players are still passing the ball with a purpose, because the purpose is to go in a direction. So what is happening is these coaches are actually negatively influencing the development of players, because you're teaching them something that will not happen and you don't want it to happen on the Saturday. So that's one aspect. The next aspect is when let's start with the goalkeeper or the center back, but this goes for any players. This is more theory, but we're just to make it easy and visible. If I am the center back and I receive the ball from the goalkeeper, or let's say the goalkeeper has the ball, it doesn't matter. If I look at the goal, so my brain is trained score, 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 and I look at the goal, in my peripheral vision, I could see the strikers, I could see the midfielders, I could see the wide players, I could see even the fullbacks. But when you do small games, possession games, or let's say small pitch football and possession on top of that, the player is communicating, so taking in and sending information very locally in a small area. So if I'm taught to play out of the back, and I'm a center back, and I only look at the fullback, I will never see the striker. I will never see the central midfielder. So football is actually taught backwards to youth players. You should be look forward as the best option. Does not mean you have to play the ball, but look forward. And if forward is not on, then this is the next option. Then you work your way backwards. And again, no one is saying you should kick the ball, kick and run. That is not what we're saying. We're saying is look at the best available option. But when you're playing in a tiny area with no direction, what are you teaching the player? What are you conditioning the brain of the player to do? That is a question that should be asked the coaches.
Yeah, there's a great Guardiola quote about Cruyff telling him to look to the furthest option first as a six. And there's also a great Guardiola quote about the dribbler, and he's had a few quotes about the importance of dribblers. Yet, we still seem to try to replicate his style without the higher passing option. I did a video this week on the breakdown of, like, when I saw Chelsea's first goal. I watched it in the TV cam, so it's not high level tactical stuff, but Chelsea obviously had a plan that they would invite the press and go over it. But the accuracy of the pass from Sanchez, but then the fullback, forget the Chelsea fullback who was high and he actually had a 50-50 with the PSG player and won it. And then there was a running power of Cole Palmer underneath, and I think those aspects I think are going out of the game, because, and I wonder if they're going out of the game. Science gets a bit of a bad knock on this podcast sometimes because it's kind of created a version of the game Monday through Friday, and I wonder if that's actually easier to manage on a Saturday, that it is conditioning players, or do you think it is coach preference to be like, image is so important today. I don't want to be anyone assessing or judging me and thinking I play vertically. Do you think that's still an issue?
I do think, because clubs, both at the professional level, youth level, they want possession-based football. But again, it's an argument based on preference. It is not an argument based on the logical intention of the game, or let's say the purpose of the game, to make it easier. So yeah, like you said, in the football world, it's very common. I like this. This is my preference. But then when you ask them why, the answer is more, I feel. It's very subjective. which subjective is every club and every coach will have subjectivity. That is fine, but there has to be an objective starting point. You take a university course, you do any if you do any course, let's say over a long period. The first thing that the university course starts with the first 2 weeks is theory. This is the theory, this is the theory, this is the theory, and then this is the application. But in football, for some reason, we don't think like that. And then your point in terms of playing short, and then long, that is okay, because the intention of the team is to play forward. That is the ultimate intention. But they're going to do it in a way where they make short passes, the opposition will come forward, and then they will play long. But if you do a training session where there is no forward, what is the intention? So that is kind of just on your example of the Chelsea example. But again, it's a lot of preference and not so much the objective point. And like you said, the image, yeah, coaches want to be known as possession because it looks good, and they want to have that tag that I played beautiful football. Yeah, listen, I don't think beautiful football is making 10 passes in your 18-yard box, losing it and getting scored on. But then you hear the argument, yeah, but it's really good for development of players if they make a lot of passes, even if they make a mistake in their 18. Yes, making mistakes is okay. But making 10 passes in your own penalty area when there's a midfielder standing there or a striker standing there thinking, oh, I'm open, play me the ball. That's not development. But coaches want to have a tag. I want to have this and that. Yeah, I as a coach or now as a director, I want to have one thing. I want my team to score one more goal than the other team. And how that happens, again, this is the senior level. And how that happens, it doesn't really bother me. I just want to win. Not win, help my team win, because I'm not on the pitch, so I cannot win. Help my team win.
So let's stay there on the director, and let's move it from a leadership perspective of, okay, and I'm kind of harping on this because I think it's important that I think it's difficult today for a coach to stand up in front of 20 coaches and say, hey, listen, you've all got your versions of how you think the game is. This is how it's going to be here, and kind of swim upstream against that thought process. I think the game needs it. I completely agree with you. I think everyone playing in the same style and a version of the game is actually diluting the quality of that style of football as well, because teams are cancelling each other out to a degree as well. So I think a lot of bravery to stand up and say, this is who we are. In a low-bearing fruit is we're going to do it better than everyone else. The hard thing is we're going to do it different than everyone else. And that's where I think that's where the gains are. Anyway, if you're standing up there and saying, what's the starting point with impacting coaches? Like, how do you sell this to coaches, or do you not sell it and just say, hey, this is it, it's this way, or it's the exit door if you want to play the other style?
What research in psychology has shown that telling people and shoving it to them does not work. What you need is, and again, this is where my mentor Raymond Verheyen has taught me a lot, is rational, logical arguments. That is the starting point. So we have coaches. So for example, this year for our semi-professional team in League One Ontario, we have a new coaching staff. I stepped away as a coach, the director. So we sit down the coaches, and we start with like I said, the purpose of the game. What does the team want to accomplish? What do individual players need to accomplish? So winning, attacking. We want our intention is to score, and we work our way backwards to the individual level. Okay, so that is the logical starting point. Now you have to give me an argument against that, because it's a discussion. And if you can give me an argument against that, and your argument makes more sense, then your argument or your logical point is correct. If you cannot give an argument, then let's go to the next. Then we go into the application part. This is kind of where your question is leading to, the application part. So we now take factors into consideration, because, like I said, that's the logical part of the game. But everyone, like you said, can do it differently in terms of how they do it. The starting point is the same. The purpose of the game is the same for anyone. How we do it is different. So starting point, and at least let's say we'll take Canada and North America as a starting point. Most teams play 1-4-3-3, back four. They have two center backs. They're used to playing against one striker, against 1-4-3-3. That's majority of the teams. So pressure, cover, they're used to that. Now we say, okay, what about if we put two strikers? Now you cannot pressure cover anymore, because as soon as you pressure, you cannot cover, because then you leave the other striker open. And we now are basing our next argument on the incompetencies of most oppositions that we play. We still haven't gone to our team yet, but the opposition, we know most teams will do this. So then we are one of our starting points is the abilities and inabilities of the team and individual players. And most players, not just in our level, but in North America, but even in Europe, cannot handle playing against one or two against two in the front line. Okay, next argument. Our players, the university and the semi-pro level, have not had a development where they're experts in terms of communicating with their environment, deciding and executing with the ball in terms of attacking actions. So their ability is lower compared to a higher level player, whatever that higher level is. So we actually don't need to have the ball a lot. Okay, if your argument is that our players are so good on the ball that they can perform any attacking action at the highest level, my next argument is then they should be playing in Europe in the Champions. So we do not have those players. So we want to actually have less of the ball than the opposition. Why? Because then that is the benefit for our players. Again, we're taking our factors into consideration based on the theory. And then we put it all together. So we want to have less of the ball. We want to give the opposition the ball. The opposition is also a low level of attacking. We know that at the university and at the semi-pro level. So they're going to give us the ball. Okay, we have two strikers close to the goal. So when we win it, if we teach our midfielders, for example, to play quickly, early, quickly, direct to the goal, it will get the ball to an area where the strikers are going to have need less touches, which their inabilities is minimized to now perform an action near the goal where they can, for example, shoot or dribble and shoot or pass and shoot against two players who have never played against this formation. So again, that's just an example of the conversation we have. And if you have better arguments, I am very open to listening and I'm actually very open to changing. But at this moment, when it's working so well and nobody else is changing because they want to play a nice style, then we're not going to change until let's say it doesn't work anymore.
All right. This is great. If I'm sitting there, right, and I'm sitting, okay, if it's not an easy way to say, all right, we'll take all these considerations in, but if you have a different way, let's sit down and discuss it and work through it. But the aspect of, I'm going to pull this up, the less time we possess the ball, the better. That concept there, because I like, again, working this through in my head, I'm thinking, all right, if I say, if I try to sell two pressing players, like, I think that's brilliant. I think you can get over the line, no problem. But the piece on the less time you possess the ball, the better. The piece I struggle, that's the piece I actually personally struggle with, because I feel that if you, again, let me put a bit of context. A few years ago, when I was working analysis, we played against a Red Bull system that it was when Red Bull 2 were in USL, and it was their youth team, so they were physically outmatched. 16-year-olds playing against 24-year-olds, so it was a mismatch. It was, but their style was, go counter press, verticality, and after 25 minutes, they just couldn't sustain the physical component. So is there a piece there where you actually need to be, if you're constantly squandering possession, does it not increase the physical demands? That's where I would push back a little bit.
Of course. So three things kind of in your question, and I'll get to that's the, let's say, the big part of the question. But the first one is, in football, in data all around the world, there is no correlation, so not causation, but correlation between there's no causation in terms of how much you possess the ball and how much you don't possess the ball. So the only time that actually starts let's say correlating to winning and losing is when it gets above 70%, because then you actually are, my team has 30, you have 70, there a correlation starts between winning and losing. You have a higher chance. Anything really below that, the logical consequence is also you have, let's say, okay, we have to get into where the possession is, because especially if it's near the opposition's goal, that means you're going to be recovering it. So when you lose a counter pressing, you're going to be recovering it near the opposition's goal. You're actually going to have a lot of counterattack opportunities. But let's say it's 60-40, 55-45, there's actually not too much in terms of correlation between winning and lose. That's the first part of the question. Next part, in terms of playing direct and let's say playing early and faster. So if our team has the ball, we want to lose the ball. What does that mean? We want to score, because if we score, we lose the ball. So that is logical. We don't want to keep the ball. We want to score, and then it's 1-0 for us, and you have the ball. So that's the first, let's say, point. Next, I'm going to give you a practical example. So in theory, losing the ball is good, because if you score, that's the best way to lose. But let's say I'll give you to visualize, for coaches to visualize. So let's say a team is playing building up or attacking from near their goal, and they're playing a back four, and we're playing a front two players. We usually play our wide players really narrow inside, two midfielders, central midfielders from middle line. Okay, ball goes to their fullback. Their fullback decides to play the ball into their midfielder, and we now win the ball. So we press and we win the ball. Now, let's say the center midfielder. So now, let's say he's won the ball, and the opposition midfielder is behind him. So he's bypassed him with the ball. He's won the ball, and now he's facing the goal. He has two strikers in front of him. Let's say two wide players, and he has a back four and fullbacks. As you know, in a 4-3, they're taught a lot of times to push right up. So let's say there's only 3 players and the goalkeeper, so 4 players, and we have 4 players or 5 players. Plus, they're disorganized. The question is, do you want to go quicker, or do you want to go slower in this moment? The answer, a logical answer, is quicker, because one, they're disorganized, you have space and limited players. Okay, now the alternative is we're going to get the ball to the same player. However, we're going to start with the ball from our goalkeeper. So we're going to play the ball to the center back to the fullback back to the center back to the midfielder, and then he's going to try to play that ball between their middle line, which is very difficult to do, and get that player turned. That is very, very, very difficult to do, and the chances of losing the ball are higher. So the question is, which one of those scenarios would you rather your team be in? And that is where the argument comes in, is that the attacking part is more difficult. That does not mean you should not work in attacking. So don't get me wrong. We do working on attacking. We do work when the opposition is set in their formation, in their defending formation. We do work on that. But this is a more advantageous position to be in, with a lot of space near the opposition goal and fewer defenders. And that means go fast. First go early and go fast. Don't have a lot of the ball. So that's kind of to answer the other part in terms of why having the ball is not always beneficial, because you're playing against a set defense, whereas transition, you're playing a lot of times against a disorganized defense with fewer players in front of you. And the final part, to go to the fitness part in terms of the maintaining part, again, this comes from Raymond again. His definition of football fitness is essentially and again, what he's taught is universally, what is football fitness? It's the ability to make more actions and maintain those actions for a longer period, for 90 minutes. So a certain playing style that contributes to winning for as long as possible. We've been doing this style of play for years, for 6-7 years. And yes, every year players change, but the players in their playing style have adapted to this playing style. So yes, at first it was difficult. So we can, let's say, do it for 20 minutes. We worked on it, football fitness sessions, where they do it now for 30 minutes. Then we do it for 40 minutes. And then also in matches. And then, yes, it was a slow process. But when you have the same group of players, the same team coming back year after year, and only a couple of changes, then they've adapted the playing style. And all you have to do is just do that playing style for longer. That's very logical. Just that playing style, pressing, transition, just do it for longer. If you want to play a slower style, just do that playing style for longer, and you will develop that, maintaining that for longer.
All right. If you're playing, say, do it for longer. But if you're up against a team that is, again, dominant, if you're losing that game, again, you mentioned before about not having control. We don't really have, eventually at the highest level, margins are small. It can go wrong, quality of play, blah, blah, blah. If you're losing the game 4-0, do you then become dependent on that style? Is there a variation of that style? Can you if the players are looking at you saying, hey, listen, it's not working, and not to get down a plan B road, but is there adaptions in that? Where do you see the adaptions?
Yeah, so essentially the question is, if you need to adapt to a different style where you actually need to maybe not play as direct and fast and it's not going well, then how do you change, if I understand that correctly, right?
Yeah, I mean, right. So, in context, you're playing on a 90-degree day, and
Yep.
you've got this game plan, and you're trying to get those counter pressing moments, and you're trying to get into those disorganized defenses and exploit them. Now you're losing the game in transition. Maybe there's a matchup somewhere that doesn't work for you, and let's just say, for example, you're 3-0 down, and your players are looking at you, gas, going, "What do we do now?" What options do you have as a coach to work around that?
Yeah. So first, taking other, like I said, we have, like I said, the logical, like I said, the purpose of the game, all that. But then you have to take factors. So we played, like I can give you a practical example. We played this weekend, and then where we are right now, I mean, we do Celsius, not Fahrenheit. So we're like 40 degrees Celsius. So I don't know, that's 95, 100. And I agree, it is so difficult to play football in that weather. So what do? Logically, if you think about it, if our front two or our front line starts really high up the pitch, then we have more space to cover in behind, and that also obviously puts more demands on the distance of the actions that the player have to cover. So we drop our line lower. So now instead of pressing in, let's say, near their 18, so now we have 80 yards of space behind us. We drop to let's say 10 yards in front of our halfway line. So now that minimizes the amount of distance that players have to cover without the ball, which obviously helps. So that's one example of doing it. Again, we don't always press high. We don't always sit low. We have the theory, and the starting point is the ability and inability of our team and the ability and inability of the other team. So that's kind of to answer. And heat, whether do we have 3 matches that week? Do we have only 1 match that week? Those are all factors that are taken into consideration. So now going back to the question in terms of in terms of the players are losing 3-0, how do you keep selling this to the players in the match? So first, for example, our university team, last year we had the most goals scored in the country. This year our semi-pro team has the most goals scored in the league, and every year we almost lead the statistics of most goals scored. Players' brains are just human brains. They associate success and whatever you're doing. To sell it, it's not hard to sell it to them. We're going to score more goals. Here's the data from the last 5 years. We're scoring more goals. We're winning more matches. So that's already, to their brains, a positive association. So even if we lose a match here or there, it's not like we're losing 4 or 5 in a row. Okay, next one is in terms of the playing style. So the question for yourself or for the coaches, if we teach our players to play, let's say, to position ourselves close to the opposition's goal, to play early, to play direct, to play fast. Now we want to teach our players, or that game, we want our players to play a little bit slower, not as direct, not as fast. Would it be more difficult? And this goes back to youth development. Is it more difficult to tell players or teach players that you should slow down or speed up? So in terms of if the players are playing fast, telling them, listen, don't play to the striker, play to the wide player, because we need to slow down this game because we're losing the heat or whatever it is. Or is it more difficult to tell a player who's always conditioned to play sideways, now you have to play backwards? Which one is easier to implement in the game? And my argument, again, this is my argument, would be, if you're telling players to look forward and play forward, but now tell them, you know what, don't play forward, but maybe this game play a little more sideways. That is easier for the player's brain than if you're always conditioning them to play sideways or backwards, to now let them play, to make them play forward. So essentially, to summarize it, it is harder to speed up than to slow down. That's kind of the analogy.
Yeah, so you're saying there that, yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that, a player who's used to playing forward, probably it's easier to play backwards and sideways, so you're giving them that option. But on the piece...
Sorry to interrupt. Not easy, easier.
I said, yeah.
This is our playing style, and all of a sudden you have to change the playing style. It's not easy because the human brain is unconscious. It's conditioned to do certain things, and then all of a sudden you're asking the brain to do something. So it's not easy. It is easy, or let's say simpler.
Yeah, definitely agree. And we'll get to the data in a second, but so on the pressing component, saying, all right, dropping back, because of the heat and because of the conditions, does that not go against the theory of closer to your goal, conceding goals and losing a little bit of the identity from the pressing component there?
Correct. It does. 100% agree. It is against winning the ball closer to the opposition's goal. But again, we're not taking one isolated action. We're looking at 90 minutes, and we're looking at external factors that are influencing the action. So the question is, if a player comes on as a sub, or we bring on two subs, we usually bring on two subs as strikers because we want to maintain the speed. So those guys can go for 10 minutes, 20 minutes. But if you're asking a player to play 90 minutes, it is not logical in the heat, in 35 or 40 degrees Celsius heat, to demand that from them, because the team is going to lose. Winning or losing is a starting point. So we're not married to our ideas. We're just implement our ideas in the best possible way in terms of the ability and inabilities, both of their actual, like what they can do in one action, but also over the duration of the 90 minutes.
When you go back then and say, put it back to player development and go to the youth ages and say, all right, reverse engineer this thing, and we want someone in the first team that can play this style of football. But then again, you've got the value on the ball, or the lack of value on the ball. Does that then, how does that look from a technical, and again, not to isolate the components of development, but from a technical standpoint, do you place higher weight on, again, the aggression, the second balls? Do you be more specific on that, or do you just overlook technique and total, long range of passing? I mean, how does that look at the U10 age group?
Yeah, so we have to put obviously technique into the context of football action. So obviously you take in and send information, decide, and then you execute, which is essentially your technique. So at the youth ages, attacking actions should be predominantly what is being taught to players, not neglecting defending, because the at that age, what we call the golden age of development, or the motor neuron development, football actions with the ball are more difficult by definition than defending actions, because the ball is constraining what you can and cannot do. Whereas when you're defending, you do not have the ball. So it is by definition easier to defend than attack. So that is the first thing. The next thing is, we're not saying that attacking is not an important aspect of the game. It is super important, because you cannot score if you do not attack. In terms of even a transition, it's an attacking moment. So players should be taught that, but the context of where they should be taught that. So at the younger ages, you play small games, small numbers, which is 100% correct. So when you're teaching players attacking, it should be the brain of the players, even at that young age, should be score. How do I score? Forward, score. So we have only, let's say we play 5 against 5, goalkeeper 4 against 4. How do you get by that first defender? Because they cannot play the ball over long distances, just anatomically and physiologically, they cannot play the ball. So, and their brains also cannot handle playing in large areas with lots of players. So how do we get, let's say, forward behind that first line? Okay, and then you work from there, because that's logically what they're gonna have to do when they're older. No matter what playing style they play, they're gonna have to go forward and score. And then the decisions they make and the technique. So now technique is put into context. It's put into a football context and football actions. So what do they need? They're going to need to dribble. They're going to need to pass. They're going to be able to turn with the ball. They're going to need to the other thousands of football attacking actions and defending actions as well. But the attacking actions are predominant. Once they get a little bit older, then they play with more players on a larger space. The brains are developed, let's say, their brains are more developed. And then they now play, say, for example, behind 2 lines or in a longer distance. And again, the information they take in, the decisions that they make, and the technique are now gradually, can we pass the ball? Because now you've taught them to pass, or they've learned to pass the ball over short distance. Okay, now we pass the ball over longer distances. So now you have to look even further. Your decisions have to be based on more players, and the technique, the execution has to be based on that. Dribbling now is more difficult, because there's 4 players, and let's say one player is pressing you, only one player is covering, but now you might have 2 players covering. So now that becomes more complex. And as you go older and older to 11v11, it develops. Isolated training. I'm sure that's a question that a lot of people ask. Isolated training, technique training, again, has to be put into context. What we see, and this is everywhere in the world, I can show you hundreds of videos, players are taught to dribble the ball around cones or dribble the ball with no context. And most of the players, if you look, their heads are down. But at 19 years old, when he's in the first team, you're going to ask him, okay, but that striker was open. Why did you not play him the ball? And he say, yeah, coach, when I was 8 years old, I dribbled my head down because I only had the ball to focus on. There's nothing else. So isolated training is not going to make a player worse, and it potentially will make the player better, but it has to be within the context and not developing bad habits. But kicking around or playing the ball around cones. When the player controls the ball, they have no context. The coach has told them to play left to right. The question is, can the coach develop, even if a player is working on his own, an isolated exercise where the player has a little more context? Can they play forward? So when they're working on their technique, can they play forward? Can they turn with the ball and nod with their head down? So they're communicating with, let's say, something in front of them. So that's where it has to be put into context. Technique is super important for young players, but within the context of the ball actions.
I actually think it's a really effective way to question, again, to draw a line in the sand and say, I completely agree, dribbling around 20 cones and toe taps and touches, I think are doing it as a busy work and not really effective. And I think that should be challenged.
If I can add one more thing, I was if you look at the top players in the world, the top, let's Messi or Ronaldo, Lewandowski, okay, these players, Suarez, okay, these guys, when they play the game, they're killers. They want to score. If you look at Ronaldo, he just wants to score and score. So people think that technique, but actually choosing a position that is closer to the goal and communicating with the game environment before the ball gets to you, and then you're in front of the goal on your own, their technique looks really good. But really, it is everything else that came before that. And yes, the executing of striking the ball into the goal is super important. But players at a young age have to be taught, score. That's where I want to go. Goal. That put this white thing into this white thing there. And yes, then you have context. Again, the isolated training world is so polluted with teaching bad habits to players. You know the one that do a quick feet with the ball, whatever they call them, all that. Their head is down for how long? And then on Saturday, the coach yelled, "Hey, get your head up! Oh, look forward!" And then one day, I'm just waiting for the day that a young player comes to the coach and says, "Coach, but for 40 minutes on Friday before the Saturday game, we just did dribbling with our head down. So why are you asking me to get the head up? Design a better activity or better exercise for me that is going to get my head up. So on Saturday, I'm going to get my head up and execute very well as well." It is so crazy when you listen to this.
Ilya, I'm convinced two worlds have collided in North American culture, and that's elite sport and the gym industry, the fitness industry, where and the worlds have collided is I pay $50 a month to go into a room with people and sweat. And I think we take that mentality into kid has paid whatever money an hour, so they've got to sweat, which means doing that. And it's low bearing fruit of they sweat, they're working hard, they're touching the ball, blah, 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 but they're not actually, you're not provoking thought, you're not connecting it to the game, you're not actually improving development. What would you do to that? I think individual coaching is important. Listen, I think you might disagree with me. I actually think it's important if it's done right. What do you think about that industry?
Sorry, Gary, I don't disagree. Like you just said, if it is done with habits that develop, I am not against players training on their own in terms of with a coach or on their own, as long as it doesn't affect team training. So if they're too fatigued for team training, that is a negative. But if it's done in the correct time, with correct time, executing technique is super important. So I'm not here saying I'm against it. What I'm saying is it can develop really bad habits. And if it's done with developing good habits, it is excellent. No problem with it.
Mm-hmm. All right, perfect. Then we're both on the same page. Then I'm going to give you $10 million at a federation. Do we need to fix that? Do we need to look at coach education and take in individual trainers into this part of it? Or if so, how would you fix that industry? It is a big industry over here.
Yeah, it's a huge one, and a lot of people are taking, like you said, making players sweat, taking players and parents' money with and not developing players, or not helping develop the players. So the first thing I would do is, anybody who wants to be involved in football, whether they're a team coach, individual coach, is they have to understand football. That is the first. Once you understand the logical arguments about football. So what is the purpose of the game? When you attack, what does the team want to do? When you defend, what does the team want to do? How do individual players contribute to that? Once you understand all that, you can then fit where does technique fit into that. And then you can develop exercises for players to improve their technique. My next question would be, what about if a player does not do any technique training on their own? Does that mean that the player will not develop into a top player? That is the question that I have. And the answer is objectively, if you go into it, is no. Because yes, technique training could help. But on the other side, if I am in a team sport and I know what the team wants to accomplish, my decisions are unbelievable, meaning they contribute so well to attacking and defending. My execution will look better because I will receive the ball in more space. So from the outside, what humans can see, the eye technique, looks better. But then possibly I have a technique issue. So when I strike the ball, for example, I decide to play there, but the ball is flying there. I want to shoot the ball in the goal, and I'm striking the ball in a certain way. Then you need to work on executing. You start at a team level. Can you fix it in the team? If you can fix it in the team, great. If you can fix it in a small group, great. And if that is not possible, the last thing you could do is technique training. Next argument is, I'm on my own. I have no teammates. I like to train on my own. Yes, you could do technique training, which is technique essentially isolated work. I'll call it technique so everyone generally understands it. And yes, you can do it. But like I said, the argument is, what bad habits can you create in that? And the big thing is touches on the ball. I love touches on the ball. More touches. So Gary, a question for you and every coach. If I have the ball and I'm a central midfielder and I'm dribbling the ball and the striker is open and I can play the ball to that striker to, for example, be 1-against-1. Is it better that I play the ball with less touches, or do I keep dribbling and slow the team down? So touches, again, has to be put into a context. More touches. It's not more touches. It should be better in terms of football context, better touches. And actually playing the ball with less touches is better. But there's situations where you're gonna need more touches. So you need to work on that as well. But again, the point is it has to be put in a context. And you have people who are starting these individual training, individual that. You ask them what is the purpose of the game, and they will not say winning the game. And that's already, you think, okay, now you're going to coach a player dribbling around cones. Of course, you don't understand that winning is the purpose of the game.
All right. So on that topic of change, all right. So let's say we're gonna try and reel this in a little bit and put some processes in place. And you mentioned Raymond a couple of times, and you've also mentioned about Raymond's advice to you as a mentor of engaging in questioning and going through. You know, if you go in with all guns blazing, it's probably not going to work. But then, does Raymond not go in? Is there not an all guns blazing approach somewhat to Raymond's work, where it's impact and going through that there? I mean, Raymond impacts coaches at possibly the highest level in coach education. I've no problem saying that. I've spoke to a lot of people who are impacted by his work. How does Raymond get the balance right in your eyes between kind of having the impact, but also then, hey, listen, have you tried this? Have you done this? How does he work for you?
Yeah. So first, in terms of his education, is he's actually very open to change and to challenging his own ideas. That is where he sets an example is. And in the courses that we do, both online and in person, especially in person ones, he's constantly updating his material in terms of his knowledge. So that is an example. He doesn't need to tell you that. You could just see that, because every year we come back and there's something evolved, something more involved. So he's not afraid of saying that this could have been done better. That is the first thing. The next thing is he will never teach in terms of You must do this, you must do that, you must do this. He gives you, he is the best at giving the theory. Like I said, the theory. This is the purpose of the game. This is the theory. And then he says, okay, use the theory to apply to your environment back home. Whereas you go to coaching courses with federations, and it is, here is the training session, mimic the training session, here's your A license. Yeah, but you don't know who my players are. You don't know what the environment that I work in. You don't know my factors. And Raymond never does that. That's where people that go to the courses are like, yeah, he does not tell you what to do. He gives you guidelines. He explains from a theoretical point of view. And that's where people in the football world, they're all about application. If you look at the education space, theory is first, and then application based on your factors. So that's where I think the federations have to improve, is that the theory of football is taught at such a low level, and it's not touched on a lot. First day you come into a course, all right, let's get on the pitch. You set up in this formation, set up in this formation. We're going to work on building through whatever, building through the thirds, whatever you want to call it. And then you have to, as a coach, recreate that in your assessment or in whatever. Some federations are going away from that, but still not enough. And then when you challenge them, that's where the problem is. How many coaches that you've spoken to have said, I'm going to my A license, I'm not going to challenge the presenter, I'm not going to challenge this, I just need my A license so I can work. So that's where already you think, okay, like there's something wrong. You want to challenge the presenter. The presenter or the educator should be very open to that, which Raymond is. That's why I can go to his courses, and I know every year there's going to be something updated, knowledge, based on his critical reflection, based on his thinking. And it's such a safe environment where when we do the courses, anyone can challenge anyone, and emotions are kept out of it. It's all about logical arguments. And then the final thing is go home and apply the theory to your environment. Nobody will tell you how to do it. And that's where I think coach education and education in general should go. This is the theory, apply it based on the theory, and argue based on logical starting point of football.
Brilliant. Brings me along nicely, the last question. You've got, on that theory, you've got books, and you showed me it before that. That's not a wallpaper behind you. There's those books go along for a long while. And also, I mean, your dad, we didn't even get to data. A whole section I want to talk about data and backing up the work and the research and all that. Maybe we do a follow-up. I would love to do a follow-up around that. But with all the research and with all the reading, and you mentioned you've talked, I think you've done a brilliant job on this podcast about the theory and application. How do you individually manage between the information you're getting in and making sure that you're not a theorist per se, that you are kind of backing that up with projects and work and testing it? And what's your approach to that? How do you make it work?
Yeah, well, the first thing is I really love football. That is the first thing. You put everything in life aside because you really love football. And more than loving football, and again, we maybe do a follow-up or whatever, is I really want the players, whether I'm working, because I work with youth players, I still once in a while work with youth players or senior players. I really want to help them develop, because I see all these things that happen that slow down their development. So that's a starting point, loving the game yourself, and then wanting the players and the coaches, because I'm a director also mentoring coaches. I really want players to enjoy the game, and I really want players to develop in whatever they develop to. So that's a starting point. Then, like I said, we did a research study with a professor in terms of looking at the World Cup, goals scored, how they scored, and we came. You read the paper, more direct, faster to goal, everything I've discussed, but we backed it up with 370,000 football actions in 2 World Cups, 22,000 attacks. So it's data that we kind of already knew was going to come out. So yeah, there are a little bit of confirmational bias, but it's one of the largest research papers done in that. So that's kind of the theory, and the reading and all that is, I'll summarize it in kind of a quick paragraph. Football is a starting point. Everything else is to support football. The football science, you call it sports science, but we coach football. So why do I need to know about rowing? I need to know about football. So football science, in terms of the data, in terms of nutrition, in terms of recovery, all these aspects where people actually in the football world try to use that as a starting point. I try to use football 11v11 as a starting point, and all these other things help my understanding and my comprehension of football. And when you really love it, you're going to educate yourself because you want to develop. And like I said, you want to help the players around you to develop and the coaches around you to develop. So it's more now, football is becoming more for me than just coaching, because I was a coach. I am a coach. I'm the head coach at University of Toronto. I've been coaching the last 12 years since I was 23, 24. But now it's gone more into impacting football on a bigger level and developing my knowledge, and with more knowledge, more of the love of the game.
Fantastic. Great way to finish. Ilya, I've loved this. This has been fantastic. Thanks so much. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing your work. Keep it going. It's absolutely brilliant.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate you having the work you've been doing, the podcast. I'm a every episode listener of your podcast as well. So you're doing great work. So I appreciate you having me on, and look forward maybe for a follow-up.
Yeah, I'd love to. Fantastic.